Our God be with you. A reading from the Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "If your sister or brother does something wrong, go and have it out with him or her alone, between your two selves. If he or she listens to you, you have won back your sister or brother. If he or she does not listen, take one or two others along with you. The evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses is required to sustain any charge. But if he or she refuses to listen to these, report it to the community. And if he or she refuses to listen to the community, treat him or her like a pagan or a tax collector. I tell you solemnly, whatever you bind on earth shall be considered bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth shall be considered loosed in heaven. I tell you solemnly once again, if 2 of you on earth agree to ask anything at all, it will be granted to you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 meet in my name, I shall be there with them." This is the gospel of the Lord. My brothers and sisters, when we look at the 3 readings all together as a whole, we can see, hopefully, a consistent weave through each one of them. And the weave is very simple. It is, we live in community, we have relationships, and sometimes they are impacted, they are broken, and then there is an instruction to us to mend them, to go out and fix them. And in fact, Jesus, in an unfamiliar and surprising way, gives us an instruction manual of what to do when there is conflict in the community. He gives us a step-by-step process. Step 1, go and speak to the person. The offended party, go and speak to the offending party. That might be a challenge for some of us. And then there is step 2. And then there is step 3, which carries a lot of consequences, some serious ones. And in the first reading, we even hear that it's actually our responsibility to go out and speak to our brother or sister that is a problem. Otherwise, we will be held responsible. So today's readings are very much about instructions on how to fix things, to put it simply. When I approached these readings, I wondered to myself, what is the basis, or what is the foundation out of which these kind of instructions, if you like, are flowing? And so I'd like to share a few thoughts with you that perhaps deepen or give that foundation so that these instructions actually naturally flow out of a sense of great love. To start with, let's look at that last line of today's gospel. We know it so well. Where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there. Such a simple but a powerful statement. So let's just pause with that for a moment. And here God is validating relationships. How important it is that even at an individual, at a couple or a triple relationship, God is present. We can encounter God through relationships with others. God is there. God is present. And I'm sure many of you have experienced the gift of a close relationship of one kind or the other, where you feel seen and known and loved and appreciated. that it unleashes something inside of you, something good, that it wakens you to something more. So these powerful one-on-one encounters, when we're open to God being part of them, are relationships of immense power and value. And so, of course, when that relationship is compromised, threatened in some way, we need to look after them. We need to do something about it. Let's go a little bit further into this notion of relationships and in particular being in community, because the first reading and the gospel is talking about, as well as the second reading, is talking about how to resolve conflict in a community. What is the role or the power of community? We've already seen on the power of the individual relationships, God being present. In the community dimension, we have the many gifts of African spirituality to inform us here. And we in South Africa hopefully are very familiar with the notion of Ubuntu. And very simply speaking, what it means is I am because we are. I am a person. I become more myself, who I am meant to be in relationship with you. And so community is very important. And anything that compromises those relationships are therefore very much of concern. And we need to do something about it. This notion of African spirituality is when someone does something that compromises the community, the opportunity must exist for that person to be, to use religious language, redeemed, to have an opportunity to be healed and to mend those relationships again. I read a story once about a particular cultural tradition where a member of a community had done something wrong, and the members gathered around the individual, and instead of criticizing, each member shared how they appreciated that person, despite what they had done. So now we're adding, if you like, a dimension to this, to the readings today of, it's not about correcting a person, going out and telling them what to do and how they have hurt you and to criticize. It's very much about how we do it, with a spirit of appreciation, insight into their giftedness as well. And hopefully also with an openness from our side that perhaps we too did something to contribute to the breakdown in relationship. And let's just pause for a moment and reflect on this power of community and why it matters. Let's just reflect back on our own South African history for a moment. We know that we transitioned from the old South Africa to the new South Africa. And miraculously, powerfully, we did not resort to violence. There was no civil war. In fact, in our interim constitution, it says we're not going for retaliation and vengeance and victimization. Those were not the values that were enshrined in that first constitution. It was about community, maintaining the integrity of the South African community. So maintaining relationships, even at an individual level, can be very powerful. Let's move a little bit more into the scriptures today. In the second reading, we hear the words, "Love your neighbor as yourself." I'm sure we've all heard these words a million times. Jesus also said them. They come from the Hebrew scriptures. They are not new to us. Perhaps when you've read them like me, how I've interpreted them have been, Love your neighbor as much as yourself, which means as much as you love and care and respect yourself, do that to others as well. And indirectly, what you also may be hearing in that sentence is, well, therefore, self-love and care is important first so that you can in turn love others. Those are good interpretations, but they're not accurate interpretations. When we look at our mystical writers, they say to us, we've inserted words into that statement. And the words that we have inserted are as much as. There aren't those three words in today's scripture. Cynthia Bourgeau tells us that what it means is this: love your neighbor as yourself. In other words, as you, as an extension of you. So by loving the other, you are loving yourself. Now can we see, hopefully we begin to see how important it is to maintain relationships. Because if we hurt another person, we're hurting ourselves, because that other is actually you. Love your neighbor as you, as yourself. The first reading gives us another dimension to this. It says one must be a sentinel or a sentry or a guardian. And in many ways, even in this community here, in all our different social spaces, we are invited to be guardians of relationships, guardians of what happens in the community. There are so many things that threaten relationships. And we can go on a global scale of racism and sexism and so on. But even a word, a hurtful word, can hurt a husband or a wife, and so on. And we know that words can cut deep for years. So it matters, the quality of our relationship and staying in relationship matters to God. As I mentioned at the start of Mass, we're entering into a season of creation. Creation is made up of finely balanced ecosystems. When there is an imbalance for some or other reason, we know the devastation that can happen. And so it is, we too are part of ecosystems, not just human to human, but we're a part of the natural world. And where there is an imbalance in relationship, in how we treat nature, in how we engage with creation, there is devastation. So today is really a reminder about how are we in our various relationships with others and creation. Let's pause for a moment to reflect on what we have heard in the scriptures today and try and apply this to our own lives, where perhaps a relationship is compromised, or perhaps there's a space where we need to say something. Let us pause and reflect.